fans. I'm here to show you today the answer to a problem that I had that I think might be helpful to others, which is that sometimes it seems like the Power Apps code doesn't run in the right order that you set things in, and sometimes things get a little bit out of sync, especially when it comes to showing and hiding things according to variables. So let me go ahead and hop in to show you exactly what it is that I'm talking about. All right, here we are in my app. Very not a good looking app at this point, but I hope you can look past the design here and see what's really going on. I've got in the on start of an app, I'm just caching a collection from SQL, just making a local cache here so I don't have to keep looking back. And then I'm adding a column called unsaved amount. This is a scenario that I've had a lot of times in the apps where I'm building, which is I've got this table somewhere and I've got like forecasts and actuals and maybe 3 different kinds of forecasts, right? 3 different columns of forecasts. I want to add in an unsaved amount column. And then based on things I do in the app, I'll use different values of those columns in that unsaved amount. And then finally, once it looks good to the user, they can then save that back to the database. Here is my gallery where I'm showing these, right? Here are the line items that I've got. And then I've got my unsaved amount column here, my forecast column, and my actuals column. And all I want to do is when I click this button, it's going to set my forecasted amount to the unsaved amount. Okay, so I'm saying, let's see what it looks like if whatever I'm doing with my unsaved is just all the forecasts. And then I have another button that says, let's set the actuals to the unsaved amount. Okay, hope you can wrap your mind around that. All I do when I hit this button is I set my loading variable to true. And then for every item here in the cache, I just change the unsaved amount to be the forecast. And then I set my loading variable to false. If I show you here what this loading variable looks like, it's just got a little pop-up, little loading GIF, and that foreground as well. So I'll show and hide those for you. That's what it should look like when it's loading. That's what it does when it's hidden. And these just set it to true and false. You can see that there. I do have a little warning here, and the reason why is I'm filtering by true. If you just put the cache in here by itself and say that we want to, for all items in the cache, we want to patch back to the cache, it won't let you patch to the same data source that's referenced in your for all. So the way I get around that is by filtering it by true. So I get all the items anyways, but it does allow me to go through and patch to each of them. And then I like using the as so that I can always, in my for all loops, reference it to a unique name just for that loop. So that's all that is. But what happens when I do this is if I click this button, you'll notice it's sitting here and calculating everything in that for all, but it doesn't show my loading. So the user here is wondering what is going on. And no matter what I do in that code block, I can't get it to show the loading while it's processing all that information. You see it finally came back, and now it's set the unsaved amount to be the forecast. So how do I get around this problem? You could do a couple things. The first one, which makes a tiny bit of sense, but if you really think through it, is not a good idea, is to set a timer. That when I click this, it runs a timer, and that timer will keep that loading screen going until a set amount of time has been complete. Even in that case, I haven't been super successful in getting it to work. Here is the only method that I've been able to get to work, is if I insert another button here, and get out of the way, come on. If I set this button, and I'll just rename it to be run code 1. And if I take my code block from here, so that when the user clicks this button, all that will happen is that we'll set the loading to true, and I cut that. And instead of running it on that one, I put it in the on select of this button. Okay, so now this button will run my collection change here, and then set the loading to false. And then I come back, and in this button, I say set it to true and then select. And here's where I'll reference that button, run code 1, right? Select run code 1. So now if I click this button, it will set my loading to true, which should pop everything up, and then it'll say click this other button, and then it will come over to this button and then select it and run the code here. Now we don't want this button to be visible, so I always hide it. So now I've got a hidden button that will actually execute my code here. So now if I click play and hit this forecast, you'll notice it does pop up my loading screen, and here it's sitting and loading while all the processing is going on within my application. As soon as the processing is done, where it's setting that forecast value to the unsaved amount, it will actually drop the pop-ups there. It's not elegant, very much not. I do not enjoy adding elements to my app where I don't need to. So unnecessary buttons, I'm not a huge fan of. But in this case, the purpose being to show this loading while this is going on. This happens to be the only way I know of and have figured out to do it. So I can do the same thing with the setting the actuals, and then here, rename that. And then we'll select run code 2. Okay, let's just double check that works now. Oh, I didn't hide that button. Okay, visibility is false. Now if I preview, setting the actual, ooh, it's not working quite yet. Let me double check I have everything working correctly there. Okay, so we can see. Interesting. One didn't run in order either. Let me check this. Oh, that should have worked there. Let's try this one. Okay. Setting forecast to unsaved did work. Show that loading GIF. And setting actuals is not. Not sure why that is. Maybe if I do this and I set it to true again, it will process another line of code. Interesting. I haven't had it run into that issue where if I call it in the second button, it still doesn't run. It's still not fast enough. The issue here is that we're setting a variable. So in the line of code, Power Apps is setting a variable. And then it's running this calculation block, right? Going through every item in my 2000 item collection and doing things to it. It does run these in order. The problem is that elsewhere in the app, I've got a visibility tied to this variable. So what happens is it sets the variable, and then this tries to hurry and become visible before this code runs, and it doesn't make it in time. The code gets running before this can show itself as visible. So what we do instead is we set the variable, and then we have it call a button. And then on the button, it runs the code. It adds in that third line there, and that gives it just enough time for it when it's trying to find the button and start executing the code on the button. This can become visible, and then it can start executing the code on the button. So in this case, it worked on the first one. The second one, we needed to add in even another line of code for it to process, just so that this visibility, had time. It's milliseconds that it needs to become visible. But if we don't give it the appropriate amount of time to do it, it won't become visible, and then it's a terrible experience for the user. I wish there were a different way to do it. If you know of, hit me up. Otherwise, this is the solution that I found to my problem. Hopefully, it helps you solve yours. And that's all I've got for you today. Have a good one.